some of the things that I learned about the river and about myself during this process are, one, certain facts. It was a surprise to me how segregated the city of Lancaster was, and that the area which was during that period definitely acknowledged as being basically the city's sewer was also the place that people of color were the only opportunities they had to be able to swim or to have access to certain kinds of recreation. That was a surprise to me in an area that looks as bucolic as this one does. Secondly, I learned that there's a lot of things related to cleaning the river. It's an environmental challenge to clean the river. How do the plant materials and the design of the waterways and the things that approach the river, how do those affect it? How does simple things like cleaning the streets make a big impact on the quality of the water that is the Conestoga River?
Something that I learned through this project about the river particularly was the impact that the pollution that we do here in Lancaster has on some of the areas that I also remember going and visiting outside of Lancaster. I learned that the river actually is one of the biggest polluters of the beaches at Ocean City, Maryland. And I realized that, that impact is so much bigger than our impact is so much bigger than I ever realized. And what I realized about myself in the same light is that, my voice and my art also has a much bigger impact than I ever really anticipated. While I was performing at the event, I actually noticed around me in the crowd that there was, political organizers and young people and old people alike. So the way that I presented and the words that I used in my piece that day were actually going to have much more of an impact on people than I ever really imagined my poetry being able to. I always kind of imagined my poetry as letters to myself. But this piece was an opportunity for me to make a letter to someone else and really fight for my community.
I learned a lot about the river, as I just said, about the storm drains and which ones empty where and which ones have filtration systems that I'm still learning and don't know which is which, but I do know that it's a thing now, so I'm so thankful that Mary reached out to all of us artists and who actually had a personal connection but wanted to give us the facts as well to back that up so we can kind of carry the message along for her. And what I learned about myself is that I can do a lot with the time that I'm given and how we all can just come together for this project no matter what we're doing in our careers. Because I'm working on so many things at once, but I always made sure that I was doing this mural and did the storm drain install whenever it was needed. And yeah, I'm just happy that we got most of them done this year before it actually got too cold.
I never realized how spiritually connected Black and brown people are to water in general. And I think that was one of the biggest notions that I realized during this project. As well as, growing up, I didn't really travel a lot. Like, me and my family didn't really travel a lot. And honestly, a lot of people that I grew up with in this city, we didn't travel a lot. But if we went anywhere, like a beach or some sort, all of us always went to Ocean City, Maryland. And one of the huge things that I learned in this project is the Conestoga River, which pours into the Susquehanna River, is the biggest pollutant of the Chesapeake Bay, which pours directly into Atlantic Ocean via, Ocean City, Maryland, and the beaches around that area.
I feel like any new experience that I go through, I learn a little bit about myself. And with this project specifically, I learned that I need to be more intentional. I need to, for one, when I see trash, I need to pick it up. If I see littering going on or things like that, I need to call it out. I have a voice just like everybody else, and I have the power to be able to make change. Even if it's just stepping out onto the street and picking up a little bit of trash. That's one less trash that the river has to deal with. That's one less trash that our wildlife has to deal with. That's one less trash that our community has to deal with.
I definitely learned by doing this project more about myself in a sense of how I can build connections with things as proverbial as a river. To me, when I was writing about the river, I kind of had like this image in my mind of how a river flows so smoothly through the water that, or with the water that love could also flow as smooth. And then I started to think about someone that I really care about. And then when I was writing my poem, I just kept getting inspired by what I was hearing, what I was seeing. And it really enlightened how I was writing that story or telling my own story of how, because my poem was specifically about a person being the river that I was connected to, or being like the river, and being able to sit there for like a couple of hours and just like listen to the sounds of the river and feel the breeze of the summer. It really, like, it made me feel closer to that person. And then hearing from the stories of other artists and activists that are in Lancaster was also just so powerful. Like hearing even Dominique Jordan's poem, that was so powerful. Like I've heard his poetry and writing before, but like to see it in person and to just see everyone performing, it was so beautiful. It was amazing to see so many Black and brown folks on that stage sharing their lights and their experience and telling their stories. And I also loved the music that I got to hear. And then walking around the city right after, it felt like the city was this magical place because it was First Friday, but it was the first time in a long time that I've ever gotten to actually go and experience First Friday. And there were so many vendors that were there that were connected to the River Connections project. So I got to learn more about just the city alone, take some beautiful pictures, and just really connect with my community.
A few things I've learned about myself and about the river. I learned a lot, like I said, a lot about the river with how it actually, is a reflection of us and, again, our integrity to do our own job in keeping the streets clean, keeping the river clean.
I never thought I would be the environmental justice person. I really learned the importance that nature has within our community. I'm from the 7th Ward. We have County Park in the 7th Ward, but when we talk about nature, I didn't really believe I could be connected to it. I don't have a green thumb. I like to say I have a green pinky toe. So I really didn't see how I was connected to the river in a big sense of the matter. So when I started diving into this work, really to educate my kids, but joining the Rivers Connection Project really made me reflect on my own personal connection to the river, growing up and swimming, but also why it's important for animals and the community and the health of our overall environment.
About myself, what I learned about myself from this River Connections project, I learned that I could make some changes within myself to do more and be better, be a better community member, but also be a better individual. One thing that stood out in my mind the most was when they were mentioning that basically when I go to Ocean City, Maryland, I'm swimming in trash. Absolutely not. I don't want to swim in trash. I want to swim in a clean environment. So why wouldn't I want to be involved?